Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, I'm here, but also we'll explain the MiniDuke malware and the clever way it breaks into your system. Also, researchers find a way to bypass Google's two-factor authentication system and steal your account anyway. And we'll have the details of 25 years of software vulnerabilities and how they break down. Plus, a big batch of your questions and even more. All this week on TechSNAP.
Everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 101 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We recorded this episode live on March 7th, 2013. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, GoDaddy.com and Ting.com. I'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by the amazing ScaleEngine.com. Go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey.
Still in studio for one more week.
Yes.
Very cool. So for those of you who didn't catch episode 100, Alan is stopping by on actually kind of on your way to the Tokyo BSD convention.
Yes.
So that's really cool. The time you
Asia
out.
BSDCon.
Asia BSDCon.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why we're actually pre-recording 101.
Yes.
Because you're going to be gone that week and we didn't want to miss an episode.
We never miss an episode.
Never miss an episode.
Hence why the last episode was titled 100% Uptime.
That's right. Now, of course, we can't claim that same thing for all of the stories we have this week. There was probably a few moments of outages, and we've got a big show for you this week. Alan has done a ton of digging for this week's episode.
Yeah.
Plus, we've got a bunch of great emails. I mean, lots of stuff.
Yep.
So should we jump into our first story?
Sure.
All right.
Yes. The first story is about the MiniDuke malware, which is being used against specific European governments.
Okay.
So basically, it's a new attack that's been targeting a bunch of different European governments. In total, it hit 23 different countries. Though there was one of those was the U.S. and one was Brazil, but almost all of them were in Europe. And basically, the malware in question exploits a sandbox bypass in Adobe Reader. And so it's a PDF exploit. But what makes this one kind of unique is that it was used against a very, very small number of people. Basically, it was a very targeted attack against only about 60 people.
Wow, we're seeing more of this, aren't we?
Yeah. So it used basically a spear phishing attack to email PDFs to certain people. Although the PDFs, unlike a lot of attacks we've seen, were very, very well crafted. One of them purported to be a NATO membership plan about bringing other countries into NATO. One was a Ukrainian foreign policy document describing their foreign policy. And the third one was about a seminar on human rights that doesn't actually exist.
Oh, but sounds very legit, I'm sure.
Yes. And basically, once the malware was on the system, it allowed them to copy and move files from the infected machines to their own servers, as well as kill processes like security software. Mm-hmm. So it could just get in there and kill whatever virus scanner you had. So the dropper that originally got in might not be detected by the virus scanner, but the main malware might have been a classic one or whatever. And this way, when they kill a virus scanner, they can keep using it. And it also allowed to install additional software after.
So they really just got full run, and they weren't really even worried about getting caught.
But this one was quite unique because of the unusual nature of the backdoor itself.
Oh, yeah?
And how very specific it was, right? They were targeting just 60 people. And in high places in a bunch of certain governments. So one of the really strange things about this one is the backdoor, the dropper that the exploit had that would then download more malware to install it,
right,
was written almost entirely in assembly.
Oh,
it was
old school.
Very, very small. It was only 20 kilobytes. Whereas, we were talking
Efficient.
about, remember, Stuxnet was 16 megabytes with all the components.
Yeah.
This dropper was 20 kilobytes.
Maybe old Steve Gibson wrote it because I hear he likes to write in assembly.
Yeah. And that's very rare for viruses and exploits.
Yeah.
Some other interesting things about it is that once it did drop onto the system, when it needed command and control to get new commands, it actually used Twitter. So it had a list of Twitter accounts. It would go out to the account.
Oh, my gosh.
I think if on one of the pages there, they show it, but it's a Twitter message is very innocuous little text message. And at the end, it has URI, ! And then a bunch of what looks like gibberish. And it's actually
it's like codes.
It's a Zord string that telling the server, the infected machine what to do.
Wow.
Yeah, I think if you scroll down a couple pages in that PDF.
So this is Alan is included in the show notes.
There's
full
the
report.
PDF for the policy documents, and then
here's some signatures in the PDF files there.
Yep. But if you scroll down, you see some screenshots of Twitter.
Keep going till we find the Twitter.
Yeah, it's near the bottom.
Look at all these. I love all this stuff.
Yep.
So what?
So basically, here's a tweet.
Here we go.
It just says the weather is good today, sunny, and then a bunch of gobbledygook at the end.
So if you just saw that on your Twitter feed, you might think this is just somebody...
you're not following this person, so you can see it, but it's
right.
mostly, I think, to trick Twitter into thinking, all right, this isn't just gobbledygook.
Right.
There's a text message here.
Right, because Twitter's got to have some sort of prevention system from...
You can tell, basically, because of those two equal signs at the ends, it means 99% chance that that's base 64 encoded. And so, it's probably a binary string that's encrypted or something.
Yep. The chat room says, I smell base 64.
Exactly.
Yeah, good catch.
So basically, to make it harder to take them down, they just have like an algorithm that picks out the Twitter account names, and then they can just keep posting there instead of having a command and control server. Although they had a command and control server for stealing the data with and so on, but this way it gave them another mechanism for that.
Yeah, except for the only problem is, sometimes Twitter goes down.
Yeah.
I look at so they've got a few different examples here. This has got to be more common than we realize.
Yeah.
This seems like almost seems like a no duh.
Yeah, because unless you're following that Twitter account, you're never going to find out about this.
Right.
And, it never mentions a hashtag, so it's never going to jump on a trending topic or something.
Right.
And it's not going to draw attention. The malware also did some steganography. When it went out to get updates, it would actually, the file it requested was a GIF.
Okay.
And so an intrusion detection system sees a download of a GIF. In this case, it's the RSS icon, right? So your intrusion detection system is going to think, oh, fine, whatever.
Yeah, this got an RSS feed.
I think that's part of the reason why they used assembly, is because if the GIF file's really large, they might have caught on. But
keeping it small,
by keeping it
embedded
small,
in the GIF, you don't notice.
Then you don't realize that it's actually like a 32 by 32 pixel GIF, and why is that 24 kilobytes?
So what were they sticking in that GIF? Like, what could they fit in the GIF like that?
Via steganography, they just injected in the middle a whole exe file, an encrypted exe file.
What causes that to get executed?
Their virus that gets the PDF. Like, it's not... Looking at the PDF file doesn't infect your system.
Right,
it's just they're disguising what they're downloading as a GIF file.
And then their virus executes it.
Yeah. One of the other things the backdoor did was gathered system-specific information, like MAC addresses, and just enough of a profile that it would be specific to one machine. And it would use that to encrypt the communications when it sent stuff back to the central server.
So each machine had like their own key?
Their own key based on the hardware. Right? And so it would send the command and control server the key, but then it would encrypt everything so that an IDS wouldn't see what it was communicating.
Right.
And this also came in handy in the second part, too. The system-specific information was also used as part of the attack. So many parts of the malware that were subsequently loaded, like the stuff that was in this GIF file, each machine would get a special version of the DLL that had a bunch of the code where it wouldn't work unless it was that one specific machine.
Wow. So they were
if you're
the really
researcher,
hyper targeted here.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but if you're the researcher, you get a copy of this virus, you put it into your virtual machine, and try to use it. It doesn't work. So you can't profile what the virus is doing, except for on the specific machine that it was supposed to run on.
That is a big win.
It keeps it from spreading and getting discovered, right? Because if it crawled all over the network, it would get discovered. But yeah, so each machine got its own custom tailored DLL file.
This is so impressive. I am really impressed with the effort here. I mean, they knew exactly who they wanted. They knew exactly how to prevent them from getting detected. And they even put some safeguards in there to prevent reverse engineering, essentially.
Exactly, yes. And so, it makes it impossible to use it in a virtual machine or something. Researchers that discovered it also say that the style and some of the methods are reminiscent of attacks from the 1990s.
Really?
Yes. So the attack pattern and some of the programming style are reminiscent of a hacking group that until now was thought to have disbanded in 2008. They're called 29A.
They recognize their style.
Which in hexadecimal is 666. That's why they're called 29A.
Oh, very clever.
They started publishing malware in a magazine in like 1996.
Old school.
Yeah, so they're old, exactly. And they're writing in assembly and having tiny files and so on. And they were active until February 2008 when the last member that was still working announced that the group has been disbanded. But it seems that one of the people that used to do that is now doing something else.
Gosh, I mean, it kind of does add up. If you had people who've been around for a long time, they likely would use assembly. They'd have some really good tricks under their sleeves. They'd have some good connections.
Yep. And it kind of makes you wonder where they've been the whole time. Or maybe they've been in a government the whole time.
Maybe they've been keeping low, targeting
or
specific
maybe,
people.
Or maybe they got caught and the deal was come work for the NSA or something.
Ooh, I like that. Sounds like a movie plot.
Yeah. But yeah, this malware is so intricate. I couldn't get at all the details. But ThreatPost's podcast, Digital Underground, they have a phone interview with the guy from, I think it was Kaspersky, and that worked on it. And basically, it's a whole podcast just on how intricate this thing is in all the different aspects.
I bet that's a great listen.
Yeah, I didn't have time to listen to it, but I'm going to make time.
Came out on March 1st, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes if you want to.
Yes, and I have also a link to the PDF with all the goodness. Because it was... do you have the PDF up still? If you look at the very top of the PDF, the title was amazing. The title is The MiniDuke Mystery, PDF Zero-Day Government Spy Assembler 029A Micro Backdoor.
Best title ever.
And then as a subtitle, it's like, or how many cool words can you fit into one title?
They're just being honest.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Look at Kaspersky being funny.
Yeah.
Wow, that is extremely fascinating one. Any other thoughts on that story?
Just that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And unlike a lot of the other attacks, it basically didn't seem to share a lot of stuff with things like Red Alert, or Red October, or Dooku or Flame or any of that. This one was unique in that how different it was from everything we've seen recently.
Yeah.
It was very old school.
The steganography in the GIF is pretty interesting, and I think it's sort of, we're seeing a trend over the last 20 episodes or so where it's these more and more, and it's just been getting increasingly more and more, these targeted attacks where, and you got to figure when a group is going after 5 to 60 people, that probably happens way more than we realize, but because it's so targeted, it doesn't get headlines.
Yeah, either.
So it's rare we hear about this.
When people find out about it, they cover it up, or B, they just never find out that they were targeted. Right? People make off with a document, and you never know.
Well, like Microsoft got hacked by that iPhone SDK watering hole, and they didn't say anything until everybody else came out.
Facebook and Apple and so on did. Yeah, they're like, yeah, us too.
Yeah, so that's just sometimes people are a little embarrassed by it.
Yep.
All right, Alan. Well, before we go to our next story, let's stop and thank our first sponsor this week, Ting.com. Now, you guys know about Ting because we've been talking about them for a little while now. They are mobile that makes sense. No BS mobile service. They're an MVNO reseller of the nationwide Sprint network. If you've got good Sprint service in your area, then you'll get great Ting service.
Yes.
And I can enthusiastically say I am a happy customer and I have no contract and no early termination fee. It's truly and completely contract free. I love that. They've also got no coverage penalties, and of course, they'll credit you for your unused service. If you use less than you thought you would, Ting drops you down to the level and hits you with the credit difference on your next bill.
Yes, that's the most amazing part, is that, if you're worried about overage or whatever, you just buy the bigger package, and then if you end up using less, they credit you the difference, and
no bigs.
No big problem.
No bigs at all. And check out, just if you're curious, go over to Ting.com or go to TechSNAP.Ting.com. That way we get credit and you get $25 off your first device. And check out their plans. You can mix and match. You get
and they have a nice little preview tool. It's very nice.
And they also have a cost savings calculator. So if you put in your current cell phone provider, like say mine was AT&T, and I was paying about $130, $126 a month, you put in your minutes and you put in the devices, and it'll calculate how much money per month you'll save by switching to Ting. And don't forget that when you have Ting, tethering, hotspot, all of those are included with your Ting service.
Yes.
That's an incredible value right there. I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, and like you said, extra phones, only $6.
Flat $6. And of course, Ting has a no-hold customer support policy. If you call between business hours on the East Coast, just give them a ring at 1-855-TING-FTW, and you'll get a human being right away on the phone. And this is awesome because I think people like us end up being the tech support for the family.
Yep.
And if you're going to add folks to this, first of all, they have a very easy-to-use, awesome dashboard. So non-technical literate people can get in there. They can check out their minutes used. They have gauges. It's very easy.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. It's just a really usable website. It gives you all the information you need without having to fight with it.
Fast. And if you're going to have some family members on there with the $6 a month flat rate, the nice thing about that no-hold customer service is you don't have to be the tech support. Just give them the 1-855-TING-FTW. Let them call Ting support, and Ting will answer the phone and take care of their problem so you don't have to. And as the tech support person, that's important.
the deal is $25 off your first device.
Yep.
If you bring your own device, you get $25 off your first bill.
Now,
instead.
they have a beta for that, so they don't have a ton of devices, but I was able to bring my Evo 4G and do it all from their website, so I loved that. So go check out techsnap.ting.com and visit that to let them know that you appreciate them supporting the show. Check out some of the plans they have to offer, and thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Love Ting. Love Ting. I'm loving my Ting service. In fact, I'm upgrading my phone now because I've liked it so much.
Yeah.
All right, this next story stung because I am a Google two-factor authentication user, Alan, and I heard it was bypassed.
Yes, but it's fixed now.
Okay.
But so for the last 7 months, researchers at Duo Security and any attacker who also found this but didn't say anything could have exploited the Android auto login feature to take over your account.
Ooh.
So basically, if you have the Google two-factor authentication, normally when you log in, you put in your username and password, and then you have to put in the second factor.
Yep. But it's like sometimes I have programs like I have for this is a problem on every instant messenger when you want to connect to your Google Talk account.
Yep.
There's no instant messenger that I know of that supports Google two-factor authentication.
Yep.
So I can log into my Google account and generate a one-time password for that application.
Yes. And so, so if an attacker managed to steal or guess that application-specific password,
They can get to anything. It's not locked down to the application.
then they could exploit the Android auto login feature to basically get access to your Google profile page without having to enter the second factor. Then once they're at your Google profile page, they can change the password reset email address, the phone number that the two-factor authentication codes get sent to, or the password reset codes get sent to, and other things like that.
That's no good.
So once they have access to your profile, they can reset the master password and disable two-factor authentication. So basically, skip it once, get in there, disable it, and now I just use your username and password to get into your Gmail, and then I can do whatever I want.
This
and
kind
you
of
could, like steal the entire account, which in this now that includes your YouTube account, your G Plus account,
my docs,
your Gmail, everything.
Yeah.
The application-specific passwords are a feature created by Google to allow you to use your Google account to log in for applications and services that don't have two-step login.
Right, lots of
things like IMAP and SMTP, right? If you're getting mail from somewhere.
Yep. Thunderbird.
Chat and the IM services, the calendar stuff that uses like CalDAV.
Yep.
All that stuff.
Yep.
So basically, if a user has linked their Android device to their Google account, the Chrome browser will use local device authentication to override Google's two-factor authentication. Because you can't, like, if you're trying to log in something on your phone, and your phone is the second factor.
Yeah. Oh, I guess that doesn't make sense because you already got that phone.
Yeah, you got that. So,
if they've stolen my phone, they've stolen my phone, and they could just launch the app to get the second factor.
The problem was if they had the application-specific password, Google thought that meant they had your phone. So it let them get into your profile page without the second factor.
I see.
It's basically a classic case of trading stronger security that you get from two-factor authentication and strong passwords for higher convenience factor, right? Because even, like we've talked about before, having a really strong password on a phone can be really a pain in the ass to type it in all the time. Especially if you use it a lot.
Yeah.
And, the two-factor thing, right? You have to, like...
multitask, and you have to
a lot of phones don't support multitasking very well, right? And so trying to get...
and then it sucks because what I do now is I jump out of the app, I launch the Google Authenticator, I tap to copy it, then I relaunch or resume the other app, and then go in there and tap to paste, and it takes like 30 seconds just to do this.
Yeah, and so to avoid having to do that as much, this is the trade-off.
And it's trickier too because it's on a countdown, so I have to do the whole sequence before the number rotates.
Exactly.
So and when I remember seeing these application-specific passwords, I thought this doesn't seem. It seems like I'm negating two-factor with this stuff because I just put the one password in Thunderbird or in Pigeon, and then I never have to use two-factor for that. And if that password ever leaked,
exactly.
Yeah.
The scary part is that the mechanism allowed an attacker to access your Google account settings portal, where they could change your backup email address, phone number, and all that stuff. And you could get into other stuff here, right? Once you have disabled two-factor authentication, then I can do stuff like go into your Google search history that we talked about last episode and see everything you ever searched for.
See all the paleo recipes that I search for all
the time.
So
the researchers clarified that the only way for this vulnerability to affect a desktop user that's not using a Google phone, the only way to affect your desktop is if your phone gets compromised, and then they go in and steal your Gmail account or disable two-factor for your desktop.
Okay.
So it's not, and Google has already patched the vulnerability.
Okay.
It was discovered 7 months ago, but it took Google a while to fix it. Well, because they had to probably re-architect the whole way the whole thing works.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess they would.
It'd be interesting to see how the system was before and what they've changed it to.
It'd be nice if they told us, but maybe they don't want to release that.
Yeah, because it would just make it easier for someone to find another problem with it.
Yeah. Well, that particular story got a lot of traction, and that actually, your version of it is not quite as scary as the version I had heard. I had heard that it was actually a little more worse than I didn't realize.
Well, it was pretty bad, but basically they had to know or guess your application-specific password.
And the application-specific password they would generate was, it was substantial. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not your grandpa's password.
Right.
So do you think then, in terms of what people could do to secure their Gmail accounts, would you still recommend using two-factor authentication?
Yes. They've patched it, so it should be fine.
And what I like about the Google two-factor system is it's not just tied to Google services. Like services like LastPass can leverage
There's
it.
actually a module, you can get a PAM module, so you can use Google two-factor authentication as your SSH login.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing a Linux Action Show segment because you can do it for your whole desktop login on Linux.
Yep.
Which would be really kind of interesting, but also seems like it could go horribly wrong.
Yeah. Like your phone dies.
Yeah. So you never,
and then you can't get in. You can't log into your computer, so you can't.
Or what I've actually
go
had
to your Gmail and try to disable two-factor authentication.
See, for me, the scenario that's a little worse is when you move to a new Android phone. The authenticator system doesn't work on that new phone until you register it. So if you need to know that before you deactivate the old phone. So I've had situations where I've switched to a new Android phone and then my Google Authenticator no longer worked. I had to go set it all back up and I couldn't log into the things I needed. So you have to be kind of tricky. You have to watch it. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that one?
Nope.
Okay, well then let's take a quick moment and thank this week's sponsor, GoDaddy.com. Another sponsor of the fine TechSNAP program and a long-time sponsor of the TechSNAP program at that.
Yes.
GoDaddy has a very special offer for this month. It expires at the end of March, and if you use the code HOSTDEAL4 when you check out HostDeal4, you'll get economy hosting for $1 a month for an entire year.
Yes, a deal for
it's like you take your truck or car, but I'm going to assume it's a truck because you got to smash down the data center wall. You just blast into there and you just say, this area of the data center is mine. I claim this, Chris Lind, and it is a sovereign territory where I have servers. Yeah. Really, at $1 a month, it's like you're equivalently doing that without having to go through all the hassle and smashing up your car, too. Unless you have a push bar, then maybe you didn't smash it up. So thank you to GoDaddy.com for sponsoring TechSNAP. And maybe you don't need hosting because you're some sort of weirdo who doesn't need to host things on the internet. Have you heard of the internet? It's awesome.
Yes.
But you might just maybe want to purchase yourself a .com. Maybe you have something else you want to do. Use the code GO35OFF4. You'll save 35% off your entire order. It has to be a new purchase, but that's a pretty good offer to get 35%. Again, that's GO35OFF4 over at GoDaddy.com, or use our very special deal, HostDeal4, to get economy hosting for $1 a month for an entire year.
Yep.
You can finally get off that project you've been thinking about doing and just do it.
Yes.
At that price, you deserve it. You deserve it. You've earned it. Go treat yourself. And thank you to GoDaddy.com for longtime support of the TechSNAP program. And don't forget, just visiting their links in our show notes reminds our sponsors that you appreciate them sponsoring the TechSNAP show.
Do it.
All right, so we have several more stories to get into. Now, one that I have next on my list, but I don't know if it's next on your list, is the new compression from Google. Yes. This has gotten some attention in our live stream.
Yes, so Google has introduced a new compression algorithm called Zopfli. Yeah. It's named after a Swedish bread recipe for some reason.
That sounds like Google.
Yeah. Basically, it's a new compression algorithm that's compatible with Deflate. So Deflate is basically one of the standard compressions that everything already supports.
Yeah, like a lot of browsers, right?
It's been built into like every browser. Even like Internet Explorer 4 supports Deflate.
Okay, so we're talking for everything.
Yes. So basically, it's a new compressor that's compatible with all the existing decompressors.
So it has its own compression system.
Basically, it just amps up the amount of work the compressor does to get a smaller file.
So it must be a lot slower.
Yes. So basically, it means it's compatible with everything that's already out there.
I like that.
You only need Zopfli if you're doing the compressing.
So the server.
Yeah. Well, you can use this. You could use this like in place of gzip as well.
Oh,
for like log files or something.
Okay.
Although with the amount of trade-off, it might not be worth it.
Yeah.
So Zopfli has a compression gain of somewhere between 3 to 8% over your standard like zlib, like GZIP
Really?
and so
That's
on.
it? 3 to 8%?
Yeah, 3 to 8%, and it takes somewhere between 2 to 3 orders of magnitude longer.
What?
Yeah, to do the compression. So it makes it most likely will only be useful for when you're compressing something ahead of time. It won't be as useful. Like a lot of what Dflay is used for in web servers is to compress content on the fly, right? Like the output of a search, like a Google search, right? They don't know the answer until you do the search.
Yeah.
So then they compress it on, at the last minute and then send it out.
Yeah.
But Zopfli is so slow, they probably wouldn't be able to do that.
So this would be like for stuff that's sitting around that they know is going to be...
Or like, if the Jupiter Broadcasting website has a bunch of JavaScript on it, like jQuery.
Yeah.
Well, if you can make jQuery 8% smaller by spending, 3 times...
And I would just do one-time compression on my
just do
side.
it once, and then you only have to do it again if you got a newer version of jQuery.
Okay. That's not so bad.
So, probably not as useful for dynamic HTTP streams, although if the user can wait, it might be worth it depending on your app and your users and so on. But they have a bunch of benchmarks. One of the most interesting ones is they have basically 100 megabyte sample of data from Wikipedia. So just like 100 megabytes of English words, like text. GZIP compresses it in 5.6 seconds to like 36.5 megabytes.
Okay.
7-zip compresses it to like 35.5 megabytes in 128 seconds.
Well, that's pretty respectable.
So you're gaining less than 1% extra compression with 7-zip, and it takes 128 seconds instead of 5.6 seconds.
I mean, you're really hoping for the economy of scale on that.
So Zopfli shaves off like another half a megabyte, making it like 34.9 megabytes.
Okay.
And takes 454 seconds.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's serious, Alan.
But the important thing is when you go to decompress, the gzip, the 7-zip, and the Zopfli files all decompress in about 900 and some odd milliseconds, less than 1 second.
So the decompression is the same speed.
Yeah, the decompression is still
fast.
Super fast. No, not a lot of high CPU usage.
I'm liking
and that's
that.
important, especially on phones, where a lot of CPU usage makes it slow, but it also eats the battery faster.
Yep.
Because if there's not a lot of CPU, the processor scales down and saves CPU.
Yep.
Or battery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
But Google's goal is to save bandwidth and battery life by using your radio less, right? If you have to receive 8% less data downloading a website, then...
It's interesting that they're taking, this is probably not really completely accurate, but it's like they're trying to fix battery life in the cloud a little bit. Like they're end devices, they're trying to improve performance and battery life by tweaking what they send you from the cloud, quote unquote.
But it'll also save your bandwidth quota, right? If you only have if you only have 1 gigabyte of transfer on your phone, if you save 8%, that's an extra 80 megabytes you could download for free.
Yeah. That's a podcast.
Yeah.
That's a whole podcast you got room for.
Exactly.
And of course for Google, they scale
podcasts
that.
won't get any compression from this.
No. But for Google, you scale that across millions of customers. That's also saving them on bandwidth.
Like if you had a multi-threaded version of this so that you could use a lot of cores, you could make something like the proxy that we've seen before,
right,
where you're super compressing everything before you send it to the phone,
right,
to save bandwidth.
Yeah.
Could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, you could do that for popular sites. A lot of people are going to go to, like NBC.com.
Well, I just think if you parallelized it enough and had a huge cluster of servers, you could do it in real time.
Which they do.
Yeah.
Google's got that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like it may take 454 seconds. That's 1 CPU core. If you have 24 cores and 25 machines, then you can do that in 1 second, and then the user's not going to notice.
And they have plenty. So,
interesting thing is that the research that led to this actually started as an offshoot of WebP, which is a project to make more compressible images.
Yeah.
It was a combination lossless image compression.
Right.
Kind of basically a hybrid of PNG, which is a bitmap that just gets gzipped, and JPEG. So a PNG is lossless, meaning once you decompress it, the image is exactly as it was when it went in. JPEG is lossy. They delete, get rid of some of the data and average out some of the pixels to make the image a lot smaller because the raw bitmap would be huge.
Right. So is this kind of like, is WebP kind of so sort of...
I don't know what's happening with that, but in the process of building that.
So it's not necessarily dead, but we don't know where it's
right. I think in the end they found that compared to a PNG file, even after PNG crush and things like and image magic, they could still get another 30% size reduction.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah. But anyway, as part of that research, they found that basically by playing with the entropy and chaining and basically doing a lot more CPU cycles, they could get more compression out of deflate and still maintain the compatibility.
That's the best part.
The interesting thing here is this probably wouldn't have been possible until we got faster CPUs like we have now.
Ah, yes.
Right? 10 years ago, our CPUs couldn't, the amount of time it took to compress that would have been so astronomical, nobody would say it was worth the trade-off.
Right.
But now it might be.
Very true. And this has sparked a lot of enthusiasm because they've open sourced it, right?
Yes. Google has open sourced this Zopfli as a C library, and it's under the Apache 2.0 license, which is kind of like the BSD license, except for it's got some patent and trademark stuff.
You would have preferred BSD.
Well, no, this is the Apache 2 license is fine because it's compatible with the BSD license.
Okay.
But basically, it means it's business friendly. It means you can build, if you wanted to, say, build a service where you Zopfli compress stuff as a proxy to people's phones, you could do that.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you modified the library.
So Scale Engine could use this.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep.
Thank you, Google.
Yes.
All right. Well, additional.
And then Network World has additional coverage, and
you have the PDF linked as well.
Yep.
Google's PDF really explains it.
And I have a link that's actually supposed to go in the previous story.
That's right. I clicked on it earlier. I was like, what is this? It's got a good cartoon, though. All right, Alan. Well, very interesting. And I know people have been asking us about that, so I'm glad we got a chance to cover that.
Yes.
VRT profiles, Alan. Let's talk about it.
Yes. So VRT, which is the Vulnerabilities Research Team.
Yeah.
Which is a bunch of guys at SourceFire, which I think is the company behind Snort.
Oh, yeah.
They basically decided to do a profile on the last 25 years of software vulnerabilities.
Oh, boy.
So they dug into CVE, which is the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Database, and the NVD, which is the National Vulnerabilities Database.
Okay.
These are the two websites we link to all the time when we're talking about vulnerabilities.
All the time. These are like the official sources.
Yeah, basically they are the official way to track a vulnerability because they assign an ID and then everybody references that so that we don't
have the same one getting named over and over again.
Yeah, because like we see this with virus scanner vendors all the time. They end up with viruses having like 8 different names.
We had Flame and Flamer. They were the same thing, and people just added an to the end of it.
Well, that's because, or like we see other ones like Win32.blah and
that's more common.
Two names that don't make any don't have any relation to each other because the two vendors happen to find them at the same time and name them.
Yeah.
This makes sure that every vulnerability has a common name that can be, you can tie together the Red Hat vulnerability announcement and the Debian one and the FreeBSD one or whatever.
Yeah, and then we were all talking about the same thing.
Yes. So anyway, they basically went through the last 25 years, which is 1988 through 2012, and graphed a bunch of stuff.
Boy, the late 80s were quiet. There was 2 in 1988.
Yeah, well, they didn't have the traction they have now either. But yeah, if we look at the first graph, we see that 2012 is the first year since 2007 where the number of new vulnerabilities was greater than the previous year.
Yeah, that actually...
Basically, every year since 2007, we've been trending down.
Yeah, we've been on decline.
Actually, in that one, it was 2006, we've been trending down. But 2012 is the first year where it went up, which is kind of interesting. However, if you look at the next graph, we see that 2012 actually had a record number for vulnerabilities, the number of vulnerabilities with a score of 7 or higher.
Yeah.
So only high risk vulnerabilities. We see that even 2012 is still down from every previous year.
2007 was bad.
Yeah.
All-time high.
Yeah. But if we look at 2012 on the next graph, which is...
this one?
One more.
One more? How about this one?
Yes.
This PDF is full of really pretty graphs.
Yeah. So this one looks only at vulnerabilities with a score of 10, which is the highest possible score.
Right.
We see that 2012 is the first year where we went back up.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as criticality, 2012 was bad.
Or, it's not the first year we went back up. It's the year with the highest number ever.
Right. 2010 was down quite a bit. But then starting in 2011, we started going up.
But you see, 2007 was the record before, but now 2012 has a record number of 10s.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's some pie charts further along as well.
All right. I'll dig those up.
We have, here's the top types of vulnerabilities. The most common type of vulnerability were buffer errors, like buffer overflows, right? That's why we have the no execute bit and stuff.
Right.
So a lot of this is, because we're comparing across all time, we don't necessarily see the trends as much. I think there's a graph for that too, but I don't talk about it much.
Okay.
But they have, buffer overflows, cross-site scripting, which is where you basically get your code to run on somebody else's website.
Right.
Access control problems, where basically you can get access to something you're not supposed to. SQL injection, right? Like 2012 was full of SQL injection. We talked about it like all the time. And then code injection, where you get your code to run on someone else's computer, right? That's how a lot of these viruses work.
Yeah.
Is either using a buffer overflow to achieve code injection or just injecting code in some way.
Right.
And then input validation, right? It means the company didn't check what you typed in and you managed to make it do something it wasn't supposed to.
Sanity check, people.
Yeah. And then there's also a pie chart that breaks down the vulnerabilities by which company they were reported against.
Oh, yeah. You want me to find that one?
It's just a down another page, I think.
Okay.
But looking overall at, I think it's 7s or higher. I think it's one of the next ones.
Yeah, this one?
The one with Mozilla being the biggest.
Oh, okay, I'll keep going. You can.
One more, I think.
Right. There we go. IBM, Microsoft. This is by vendor.
Yeah,
this one's pretty cool. But
one more.
One more. And then you can also look for vendors with the most high security vulnerabilities.
Yep.
And here we have.
But yeah, the top, I think there's one more.
One more? Mozilla here.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
So if we look at the vendors with the most high severity vulnerabilities,
right.
They were Mozilla,
Yeah.
Apple, Cisco, Sun, Adobe, IBM, Mozilla, HP, Google, and Oracle. However, if we look at the chart that's 10s only, Oracle moves from the very end of the list to the very front of the list.
Java.
Had 204 critical vulnerabilities, and that's 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Now that's not just Java, because probably a
SQL and Oracle database.
Yeah, everything of Oracle. And so some of those will be classified under Sun, like Java vulnerabilities from before Oracle bought Sun will be under Sun, right? Because we're looking at the whole 25 years.
Right. Yeah.
But another interesting one is one right near the bottom when they look at the mobile vendors.
Yeah. Big space, right?
Yeah.
Lots of stuff in mobile these days,
Of
Alan.
all the vulnerabilities reported against mobile operating systems, iPhone has 81% of all the vulnerabilities.
Great Caesar's Ghost. This pie chart is all iPhone.
Yeah. iPhone makes up 81% of all the CVEs. Android is 9%.
That honestly surprises me.
Windows is 6%, and BlackBerry is 4%.
I mean, honestly, maybe I just have the wrong frame of mind, but I think of Android, I think of a lot of gingerbread and froyo devices that aren't getting patches. But I guess like we were talking on the pre-show, some of those would probably get caught as Linux kernel vulnerabilities and not necessarily Android.
Yeah, if it's a problem with the kernel that
tools
goes under
that-
Linux,
yeah.
and if it's an app that Google didn't make, then it doesn't fall under Google.
Right.
Whereas iOS has a lot tighter control.
So everything is
But
Apple's
we talked about Apple in the last couple of weeks a bunch of times. With there's a way to bypass the lockout code and just access somebody's phone.
And this has been a repeat problem.
Yeah, and a lot of these vulnerabilities that get reported are the ones people are using to root their iPhones. If iPhone didn't have so many, people wouldn't be able to root them.
Maybe if they would just let us root it ourselves, then people wouldn't be finding so many vulnerabilities. Apple.
They wouldn't be looking as hard.
Yeah,
Yes.
Apple.
Anyway, I have a link here to the full PDF if you want to read through it, because some of these charts they're really interesting just to see the trends.
Oh my gosh, so cool.
Like here, you can see what company is green in that bar?
That's Windows.
Yes. The Windows Phone basically dropped off because nobody used it anymore.
No. And look, it just makes a blip right here. You see that with 3 in 2012. It comes back. It's basically completely off the
iPhone
radar.
has just been trending up constantly.
Yeah, it really has. And interesting, Android's kind of wonky. Wonk.
And then BlackBerry's been going down because nobody buys them anymore.
Oh, boy. That's
a new one, and apparently people like it, but whatever.
They've also got it broken down by product from Linux kernel, Windows, Chrome, CMonkey, Mac OS X. Really, really good PDF, and we'll have that linked.
It's just good analysis
from the folks that do Snort.
Yeah, and they have a couple in there about where they compare just a shorter term. Because it'd be really interesting to be able to, if they made dynamic versions of these where you could move sliders and say, only show me the last 10 years instead of the last 25.
Yeah, and see who's...
Or break them down and say, all right, have we been getting better about buffer overflow attacks?
My sense is we have been, but that's just my overall sense. Because now they're getting more sophisticated. And
well, also higher end, higher level programming languages handle a lot of the buffer stuff for you, so there's less chance of you using the wrong size buffer and stuff.
Good point. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
No, that's about it.
All right, then before we run, I just want to remind folks that you can support shows like this and the other programs on the Jupiter Broadcasting Network by visiting our affiliates. Just go down to the bottom of jupiterbroadcasting.com and click on Amazon or eBay or Netflix or Newegg or ThinkGeek or Best Buy, audible.com, which, Alan, we should mention, you are an Audible fan because you've been traveling recently, so you've been taking advantage of that.
I had an hour and some at the airport. Before my flight left. It was a 4-hour flight, and then I had a 2-hour layover, and then another hour and a half flight. It was like having the audiobook on my Kindle. Was amazing.
Fact, this audience would really like the book that both you and I just picked up from Audible.
Yes, actually.
This is
I bought
great.
Amazon recommended the next Tom Clancy book, and I was like, sure, whatever. I've read this whole series. I might as well read the next book.
See what it's
But it's called Threat Vector, and it turns out it's actually about cyber warfare.
Yeah, and it's kind of
but it has the signature Tom Clancy realism.
Yeah, it's kind of got like Chinese attackers and all kinds of almost ripped from the headlines.
It came
type
out
stuff.
in December of this year, so that means it was written came
out in December of 2012.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it was written in early 2012, maybe even 2011, and the main protagonist is a Chinese professor who's running a group that's attacking the U.S. government and stuff. All right, doing cyber warfare all around the world, actually, not just the U.S. government and stuff. But it has the Tom Clancy realism. Like when they're talking about it, it's like this group of guys came up with a 0-day exploit for a Windows server, and they used it like this. And basically, unlike a Hollywood movie or whatever, all the computer terminology and the hacking, everything
is legit.
It
doesn't take you out of the book when they start using tech terms.
When they use tech terms wrong,
It's
it throws me right
it's
at
painful.
it. It's like,
I know, the one that stands out the worst. One time I was watching 24, and they're like, "Well, let me just redirect the operating system to the I/O platform, and then we should have this fine." I'm like, "What?"
Yes,
hate that. So
exactly. This has the realism, like the way they broke into stuff and the way they're attacking stuff.
Yeah. So that makes me feel a lot better. I already bought this. I just started it, but it's called Threat Vector. It's from Tom Clancy, and it's
it's also interesting. I didn't make the connection right away. Like Threat Vector can be used in military terms as well, and the cover has a picture of a fighter jet, so I kind of figured that's what it was.
Yeah.
But in this case, they even in the book they refer to the threat vector of the computer, like how they got into the computer.
There you go. And it's 18 hours long if you grab it from Audible. And if this is your first Audible account and you use that link at the bottom of our show notes, then guess what? You get it for free.
Yes, and it's narrated by Lou Diamond Phillips, who does a really interesting Asian accent.
Well, there you have it. All right, Alan. So with all of the news done and our pick for the book that we're both enjoying, and it's funny because I didn't even realize you're not an Audible subscriber. You just buy it from Amazon.
Yeah, I bought the ebook for my Kindle, and they're like, for $4 more, you can get the audiobook where it's whisper sync so that you can switch back and forth between the text and the book without losing your place. I was like, I want to try that.
That is really cool. So, you for when you want to read, then you pick up on the book. So if you want to try out Audible, use the link at the bottom of our show notes, and you'll help support the network.
Yes.
And you can enjoy yourself a great book. Alan, with the news all done, I think that might mean it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com, or popping that contact link at the top of our site, or starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Mr. Jude.
Yes.
Are you ready for our first email?
Sure.
All right. It comes in from, I believe, I'm going to go with Cole. His name is Cole, Cull. Okay. He says, "Hello, Chris and Alan. I've been a listener of TechSNAP from the beginning, and I love the show. I'm also a listener of Last SciByte, Faux Show, and Unfilter." Very nice. Dude, this guy's rocking it. He says, "I'm about to purchase a new home with some outbuildings. While the house is safe in a safe area, I would still like to purchase maybe up to 16 security cameras to monitor the exterior of my house and buildings. I'm concerned about bringing this quote-unquote computer into my house and potentially opening up my land to attacks via island hopping. It's ironic that I'm concerned about security when dealing with a security system, but it is a computer after all." And so some of these he's looking at, they include this PC that probably runs some old embedded operating system.
Right, and has the hard drives and records and spools and
stuff.
And now,
it's,
if he's going to have 16 cameras, you might want to double check. I can see a hard drive having a hard time keeping up with 16 streams at once.
I think it doesn't do a full 30 frames or anything. I think it's know.
And I think some of them have motion detection, so they only record when they see something moving.
But the problem is these have web servers on them, and the way you manage them is by theoretically plugging them into the web so that way you can monitor them from home. And he's worried that, it's an embedded operating system. Maybe the vendor doesn't supply patches in a timely manner. Likely. Does he have to worry? Should he be worried about exposing his home network by putting this on the web and maybe opening up some ports?
So what you want to do in a case like that is create what's called a DMZ or DMZ, a demilitarized zone. And basically it'd be a separate VLAN or physically separate network that only the insecure devices are on.
Maybe you could even have it on its own dedicated network interface card off your firewall.
That's how, with a pfSense, what you do is basically you normally have one NIC going out to your internet and one that goes to your LAN where all the clients are.
Yeah.
You can just add a third NIC or a VLAN on the second NIC.
Yeah.
And say, in this case, you would just have an extra interface in your router and it'd go out and it would be physically isolated. It could go out to the internet, but it could never talk to your LAN. And you could make firewall rules to say the LAN can go to the security system and check the video, but the security system can never connect to the LAN.
Yeah. That's ideal. That's really ideal. That's really what he wants to do.
Yeah, exactly. So when you set up a DMZ like that, you're just stopping. You're basically putting all the servers that have to be facing the internet in their own little sectioned off part, so they can't reach into your LAN.
I like the chat room thinks maybe with 16 cameras, maybe he's on the government watch list. I just assumed that he wanted to help us out by getting a big one and using the affiliate links.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Alan. Our next email comes in from George, and it's also about DMZs. He says, I watch all the episodes of TechSNAP, some of them even 3 weeks after recorded, but I just need to catch up on them. I never miss an episode. I should mention my first language is Spanish, so please excuse any grammatical errors. My question is, my new boss is very obsessed with the implementation of a DMZ on our network infrastructure. I understand the best practices are advised to have a DMZ, but I have argued with him that within our network of servers, 24 Linux boxes and one Windows server, I have defined an internal firewall rules on each host to allow only necessary services to other servers and my internal users. If the servers whose service port is open to the internet is compromised, the attacker who has gained access to the host may also access the service that are open to the server, whether my server is located in a DMZ or not, because these services require the server to be available. So, and he goes on to reference that in episode 82 of TechSNAP, we mentioned that DigiNotar's compromise was accomplished by using an island hop from their demilitarized zone into their network. And so he wants to know how he can explain to his boss how even though you could have something in DMZ, it can still be vulnerable to maybe an island hop type attack.
Well,
things
it
like
depends if your DMZ is set up correctly. In this case of DigiNotar, it wasn't.
Right.
So basically, the idea with the DMZ is that you'd have all the servers that need to face out to the internet in this one VLAN, such that they cannot talk to all the internal stuff, like all your client machines and your databases and stuff.
Right.
So the servers facing the internet are not allowed to talk to anything internally at all. Right, they're basically completely separate.
Right, so they can get completely owned, but they're not allowed to talk to
If your web server
anything.
get owned, then they could own the second web server, but they
Right.
can never get into their client machines.
Right.
The issues come up with sometimes the website needs access to, say, the billing database that's in the back end. Mm-hmm. So then you have to allow this in, and then if you poke too many holes, then it causes problems.
Those are attack vectors.
Yeah. So if you have 24 servers, if you put them all in one DMZ, then, if they hack one, they could get the rest, and it could be an issue.
Yeah.
So you at that point you might actually consider having multiple DMZs if you can.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What do you think? I thought it's interesting. It would drive me crazy to have all of my servers have firewalls.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Yeah, but
Unless
if
they
the
were
firewall
very
is just,
static in their functions. Or,
he's talking about having the firewall up and then blocking any ports except for certain ones. Well, unless there's a extraneous service that's not supposed to be running that's going to be blocked by that firewall, only allowing the ports you have open anyway doesn't actually accomplish anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like if the port's not open, you can't connect to it. It's
right.
not like if you don't have a firewall.
If you don't have a service listening, there's nothing to connect to.
Exactly. It's like if you don't have a firewall, but you don't have any services running, then the machine's just as secure as if it didn't have a firewall.
Right. And if you have a service running, you likely want to accept connection, so you're going to allow it through the firewall.
Yeah. And so at some point and if your firewall is just blocking certain things, you're enumerating badness and you're going to just never be able to keep up.
So the key to DMZ, which kind of was answered in our last question too, is it's really all about getting it set up correctly and not making it porous so that there's ways into the network.
Yeah, basically the general idea is that nothing in the DMZ is allowed to connect into your LAN. Your LAN can go out to the DMZ to access the servers, but the DMZ is not allowed to go into your LAN at all.
Yeah.
And the idea would be keep your databases and stuff in there unless if a database has to be accessed by the web server, maybe it should go in the DMZ as well. Or
a different DMZ.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, when I worked at a bank, we had multiple DMZs for that reason. We had a web server DMZ and we had a database DMZ, and there were some very specific rules on what was allowed to talk to what, and we monitored it very carefully.
When I worked at the power plant, there was the business LAN, which is where all the Windows computers were, and then there was a production LAN, and that's where the Solaris systems that actually automated the operation of the electric plant.
The ones that did the real work?
Yeah, and basically to make sure a Windows virus didn't get over and screw up the system that's running like the turbines and the generators and stuff, they were completely firewalled off except for a couple exceptions.
Alan, if you do that, how can the Chinese remotely hack you?
That was the point.
Oh. So you mean you can just set
They can
it up
own
that
the
way.
Windows computers if they want to, but there's... if some secretary gets a PDF file and opens it, and
funny, what a concept!
but don't let them get into the LAN that's
Right.
running the power plant.
Right. All right. Our next email comes from Jugatir. I'm not sure. He says, I'm very new to all this, but after finding your show a few months ago, I built a home server. The goal was to store backup and file shares, share files across the home network with my family. It's an Intel H77 chipset, a Celeron Sandy Bridge processor with 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's got Ubuntu 12.04 on there. Now, here's the question.
He must not have been listening when I said use FreeBSD.
It's cool, too, because he's got it serving up a Raspberry Pi running OpenLink.
Nice.
He says, I jumped right in, but now with the lack of planning and understanding, I find myself in a situation. I have 2 hard drives, a 70 gigabyte and a 3 terabyte. They are organized like so. The 70 gig has a swap and boot partition with an extended partition with a virtual partition containing root. It is full. The 3 terabyte drive has a 1.5 terabyte that itself is a logical volume. Boy, he's really getting into the detail here. I would like to try to do something right and convert the 4 3 terabyte hard drives into a RAID 10. Can I do this? And if so, can I do it safely? Some of the combination of copying, cloning the virtual volumes and recombining them into another virtual volume or something like that. Oh boy. He says, or am I totally out of luck and need to start all over with better planning? Thanks for the great show and the help. I show my support through Amazon payments and the affiliated link, but who knew this could be so much fun?
In order to basically take some drives that have data on them and upgrade them into an array,
Yeah.
ZFS can do it if you do it one disk at a time, although it hurts performance because you end up with too much data on the first disk that you add and not enough data on the second, on the last disk.
Then you got to
add,
rebalance it all out.
and then you'd have to balance it manually because there's no block point.
Okay.
The block pointer rewriting feature, Sun never finished.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it would definitely be better to start over if you can.
Yeah.
If you can't.
There's not really. Because the risk is so high for losing that data.
LVM, can you add a disk later?
Oh, yeah.
Well, then, if you create an LVM with one disk and then add another, but that would just span them.
The problem is
you have to create it ahead of time.
Yeah, you're going to need...
ZFS is the only option. With ZFS, if you have 4 1.5 terabyte drives, then you could add one mirror.
Yeah, you'd have to do one drive at a time, make it ZFS.
You could do, if you had enough free space to do 2 drives at a time.
Okay.
You could create a striped-only array.
Okay.
So you got 2 drives that are just RAID zeroed.
Yeah.
Then, after you copy all the data off the 2 other drives, you attach the 2 second drives, one each to the stripes, and they become mirrors. And you end up with 2 mirrors of 2 disks each that are striped, and that's RAID 10. It's just not called RAID 10 under ZFS.
Huh. Well, that would definitely work. It seems like...
Well, I did something like this recently. I had a machine that had Gmirror, which is FreeBSD's software RAID.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically had 2 disks that were identical, and they had my root, swap, user, everything, right?
Okay.
I've decided I was going to upgrade the machine to root on ZFS. So everything would be ZFS.
Yeah.
So what I did is I pulled one of the 2 drives out of the mirror,
Okay.
reformatted it, partitioned it the way I wanted it for ZFS, which was all ZFS.
Oh, yeah.
There's like a boot sector and then all ZFS. Created the ZFS array, created all my file systems, created a bunch, huge number of volumes because I have my ports directory has this compression setting, and the data, the logs directory has this other one. It's this huge list. Anyway, so I set that up, and then I copied or I used tar to basically image all the files off the old Gmirror onto the new ZFS on root and divide them up into the proper file systems.
That's pretty fancy.
Then rebooted onto the ZFS array, erased the second drive, and inserted it into my single available drive thing as a mirror, and now
voila.
Basically I attached the second disk, it did a scrub where it resilvered it, and now I have a mirror. And I did this all on a machine in London, England, over the internet.
So it's definitely possible.
With only 2 reboots.
I mean, I think, since he's running Ubuntu, he's probably on extended 4, so he's got that other extra factor of having to, he's going to have to definitely have enough space to pull a drive out at a time.
Yep.
And any Linux solution like LVM is going to want to rewrite, that drive. So you're going to...
Yeah, so basically you'd have to do some drives at a time.
Yeah.
And I don't know any system other than ZFS where you could create it as 2 stripe drives and then upgrade each of those stripes to a mirror to create your RAID 10. But yeah, I've done something like that with the 2 drive. Well, actually, I was going from mirror to mirror, so it wasn't a big deal. But to basically do a setup like that with 2 drives.
All right. Well, let us know how it goes. Let us know what you end up doing. All right, Alan. This next email. What are you going to say? Andre? What do you think?
Yeah, it's Andre.
Andre? Okay. Andre writes in.
Is he from Malta?
I think so. See, he's got it right there at the bottom. First
Not
off,
confirmed yet, but I plan to go to EuroBSDCon, which is on Malta this year.
meet up
In September.
Meet up.
End of September.
So he writes, says, first off, awesome show. I keep coming back from reading the latest news stories on my own, as they're always covered in more detail on the show. Plus, you always seem to throw in something us viewers can learn, too. My question mainly has to do with PHP and MySQL. More specifically, the best practices for storing database credentials and also generating and managing salt for hashing. I'm currently trying out my own personal project, as you guys suggested in the previous episode, and want to get as close to industry standard as possible to get the most learning experience out of it. That's a great idea. Yep. Thanks, and keep up the amazing work. P.S. Congrats on episode 100. Can't wait for my shirt to arrive.
Yes.
Right on.
Okay, so the first, I'll answer his questions in reverse order because that's easier that way.
Okay.
So he asked about how do I come up with the salt for the hashing.
Yeah.
If you're using the PHP's crypt system or the new one that they're going to have in 5.4 or 5.5,
with which we talked about,
it generates the salt for you usually, and that's better.
Yeah. That's going to be standard.
Yeah, it's usually they're base 64, so you just use a strong random number generator.
Okay.
They're basically, you shouldn't have to do much yourself.
You don't have to invent.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be inventing something. You want to be using what everybody else does. And so, yeah, the salt is usually auto-generated for you once you specify the algorithm. And if it's not, then normally, actually, I think mine is just the str_shuffle with all the characters from base 64.
Okay.
I think there's a good example of it on the php.net/crypt, which is the
okay.
It's the shortcut to the manual page on the crypt function.
php.com or php-crypt?
php.net/crypt.
php.net/crypt. All right, so that might be a good place for Andre to go check that out.
Yeah, and so they have some examples here, and they show. See, as long as you're using the crypt_blowfish, it should generate the 24-character blowfish
Bingo.
hash or the salt for you randomly.
Bingo.
And if not, I think they actually have. Be careful. There's two sections in a PHP manual page. There's their examples, and then there's the comments. Comments aren't always good, right? People could write any code snippet there. And maybe it's not always the best way to do it.
It's kind of the same thing like
but
on Stack
down
Exchange.
a little bit, do they have an example of coming up with the salt there?
With HTTP password, different hash types. Don't see it.
No, okay.
But maybe in the comments.
But anyway, if you read through the manual page, it should explain it. But basically, you can randomly generate it because it's just all the characters from base 65 or base 64, which is basically A through Z, upper and lower case, and 0 through 9, and then like underscore and dash.
Okay. That's a great question though, because if you didn't know that PHP just sort of had that functionality built in,
you would try to build it yourself, and that's where you go wrong.
Yeah, and that's where you would end up having.
And you end up with people doing things like, I took the MD5 of the password, and then I stuck a salt on the end of it, and then I took the MD5 of that, and that's my secure hash. I'm like, so that's 2 rounds of MD5. If you use the old crypt that people don't recommend you use anymore, the guy who invented it recommends you not use it anymore. It did 100 MD5s. It's like, if you use what you should use, you should be using at least 10,000 SHA 512s.
Yikes.
So
that's for serious.
Yeah.
That's for serious.
And the crypt method will do all that for you, although if you look back at the older episode of TechSNAP where we talked about the PHP hashing, their new way of doing it is so much nicer. And they have like a PHP implementation of doing it. So even if your project only has 5.3, PHP 5.3, there's a library that lets you use it. I highly recommend using the new one because it takes care of things like the salt for you.
Well, and that's going to have the longest long-term, going forward.
And exactly. It'll be the standard in 5.4.
That's the words I was trying to find. All right. So you had a very interesting find from...
There was one more story. So sharing the root.
Oh, yeah, right. Sharing the root. So sharing the root is probably a question a lot of people have that have... people they want to work with. This came in from Penguin Fred. He says, "Hey guys, I was just watching TechSNAP 99 and your request for feedback, and one of the stories piqued my interest, the cPanel root story, because I just purchased a VPS and within 24 hours I had a 20-minute outage. So I contacted support and they said they couldn't access the VPS, so I would need to do the following. Give them the root password. Enable SSH authentication and root login, which goes against everything you guys always tell me about. They mentioned I could send them a key, so my best option would be to create them a user and send them a key so I could then revoke it if something was to go awry. Or should I just give them a new key for every support inquiry so that way they can access it when I agree? The machine is running Ubuntu 10.10 to be updated next month at 12.04. Loved all 100 episodes of the show. Thanks. So this is one of those things where you got people you want to work with. You don't necessarily trust them.
Yeah, and like for example, like on all my FreeBSD servers, it's the default to have root login disabled.
Yeah.
Some of them will enable it for me because they don't do the hassle of adding an extra user and stuff. They just enable root login and then give me the credentials.
Okay.
But one of the first things my Puppet does is apply my SSH config, which disables root login, disables DNS login, does a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I ever have to give them root, I either have to give them my password, which, part of the plan sometimes is like, oh, well, if I ever have to give out the password, I'll change it to something less and then give it to them. Yeah. Well, if the server's down and I can't access it, I can't do that. Right. So yeah, and that's what he also asking about, should I generate a new key every time? If you end up with if you disable the old key and then you can't access the machine, you can't enable this new key. So maybe if you want to use a different key every time, you have to generate at least one spare key ahead of time. So like when you revoke an old key, make sure you generate a new one and have it in a safe place. Yeah. Or maybe, you generate like 100 keys or something and store them and then use them one at a time or something. Right. Now that's but yeah, so what I've done for ISPs that need access before is I create a user for them. Like support or whatever? Yeah. Usually not something generic because that gets the most hacking attempts. True. So I avoid the name of the company and generic ones like admin and support. So don't call it like your data center's name? Yes. Yeah, okay. So I create a user for them and it has a password, although you could use an SSH key, which would be better. And then I use sudo to give them access to switch to root. Okay. And I just tell them... And you can lock it down there a little bit, too. Yes. So I just say, well, what I do is say, log in with this username and password, and then do sudo -s, and that gives you a full root shell. So you don't have to prefix every command with sudo, because that gets really annoying. Yes. So the first thing I do when I log in a box is sudo -s and give me a shell. Yep. Me too. And so, that way you could do that. So... Yeah, you might want to give them a permanent key, although you might want to give them a key you can turn on and off. But just make sure you always leave a way to access the machine if it was completely offline and you can't reach it to allow a new key or reset a password, they need a way to get in. The other thing that's difficult, the only problem with the key, going the only key route, is if they're going to have physical access to the box where like it's down. Right, if they're standing at the console, they can't log in with a key. Yeah. So if it's something wrong with the network, like if you screw up the firewall and lock everything out, they need a console user. Done that. Yeah. Done that lots of times. Or hard drive failures. Or sometimes something just fails at boot and it's like it goes into single user mode and it needs a... Forget a quote mark in one of your config files. And especially if it's rc.conf and your machine won't boot. So yes, you definitely want to have a user that has a password that you can give out to the data center tabs. Yeah. So it's a great question, Penguin Friend. It's something that you kind of need to think about before you need it. Yes, exactly. You have to have a plan. Yeah. All right. Now, this is interesting. Now, here's what I was going to say earlier is you came across this article on, and it kind of got you thinking on a question we could sort of pitch to the audience. Kind of. Right? It's more one that audience have asked us a number of times. Oh, okay. Right? Oh, okay. I was thinking the reverse, but so we're going to answer. Yeah, so like we've talked about all these Java exploits where they're installing a rootkit or a vulnerability or a backdoor or something on your computer. It's like, why like, with the MBC attack, well, that one was banking, so that one kind of made sense. But with a lot of the other ones, when they take over your machine and it's infected, what use is that to them? And actually, end users ask me this all the time, like especially with like the ad hijacking type. Yeah. Why are they doing this? Yeah, so, and there's a lot of different ways. Yeah. And they have this nice little infographic here. I don't know if you can zoom in that a little bit. I can bring that up a little bit. But some of the things is, they steal your username and password, and then they get, access to banking information, or a lot of times is actually going after games, right? We've seen this with SOTOR and Stow, where they've tried to get your username, or it happened with WoW hundreds of times. Oh yeah, they're always trying to get your game account because that's worth a lot of money, possibly. Yeah, but also if you're like a web designer or a sysadmin or something, if they get access to your web one of the previous, I think it was Code Red, or not Code Red, sorry, the Red October one. Remember, it would look for and steal your passwords from like Qt FTP and FileZilla and everything. Yes. Because if you have access to a website, then they could use your website to host stuff. Although one of the other things they could do is they use your machine to host stuff. Although if you're behind a NAT firewall, if you don't have port 80 forwarded or the ISP blocks it, you can't host a web server on it. Yeah. But sometimes they can. Mail relay, whatever. Yeah. Or if you have UPnP, sometimes they can punch a hole. Yep. So they might use your computer to host stuff or to send spam. This is, or like, sometimes it's just something stupid like to generate clicks on YouTube videos. Yeah. It can be really stupid stuff. Also, steal your CD keys, your Windows CD key, your Office, your games. I know game CD keys used to be fun to steal.
A lot of software can actually just query the registry and just pull it. Like Bellark is a really popular inventory software, and a lot of times in the report, it'll just be like, here's your CD keys for a lot of your installed software.
And so a virus just does the same thing, except for send all the keys to somewhere. Now, back when games, it used to be really popular to do that. To like, I need a legit key for StarCraft.
Right.
So you steal the, when games didn't have as much online authentication, it would just, you need a legit CD key.
Yeah.
And the ones you would get off if you pirated the game, the one that came with it, that one was blacklisted. But if you're just mooching the key off one other person, there's only ever 2 people using the key, it's probably not going to get banned.
It's a nice little infograph, and if you've been in like the position I have too, where I've been asked a lot of times on the spot, and I always kind of give some iteration of what we just covered, but it's never as complete. And this is something they can just look at and visualize. I like that.
Because the other one you talked a little bit is reputation hijacking.
Yeah.
Is if they take over your computer, they can use when you're logged into Facebook, they can have you do likes for businesses, and they basically charge businesses money. It's like, give us $100 and we'll get you 10,000 likes. And all they do is use infected computers and legit Facebook accounts.
Right.
That way, Facebook isn't if Facebook,
it looks like regular activity.
Basically, Facebook will detect if they create fake accounts and all they have ever done is 100 different businesses.
Right.
But if
it's your account that you've been using for years,
then they just sneak in these extra likes, or use it to try to infect other people on your Facebook with viruses or whatever. Right. And they could join a botnet which does click fraud on ads or send spam, launch denial of service attacks, host stuff. I don't know what else is there. Any other interesting ones on there?
They have
steal your digital currency, steal
email
your
account,
and stuff.
Bitcoins. That's funny, especially right now, right?
Yeah.
Access to your corporate email, of course. Yeah. All kinds of things like that.
So, CAPTCHA breaking. If your computer's infected, then they can basically add extra CAPTCHAs to a bunch of everything you do. It would pop up a CAPTCHA, and when you answer it, you're actually breaking a CAPTCHA so that they can sign up for a fake Gmail or something.
Mm-hmm.
They can
spam or whatever they want to do. Tricky bastards, Alan.
Yep.
All right, so you can email the show, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, pop that contact link and fill out the form for TechSNAP, or start a thread in our subreddit, and we'll try to answer your questions in episode 102 of the TechSNAP program. But Alan, with the emails all done, I believe that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. And welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, this week, the Roundup isn't stories that we didn't get a chance to cover at the top of the show, and they are links we want you to take care of or look at after the show, and they were not supplied by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Actually, we kind of did a special edition.
We already had a Roundup earlier today for episode 100, and when I was going through stories, there were so many stories from conferences, like RSA and cyber defense.
So we're going to have a conference roundup, right?
So I did a special conference roundup.
I like that.
So the first one here is how to ask good questions at RSA.
Oh, all right.
So this is just a little bit, a lot of times people, when they're asking questions at a conference, a lot of people have good technical questions.
Right.
But if there's very few people that want to know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Like if you're asking a question that's kind of specific to your setup.
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be better to ask that of the host in person after.
Off to the side.
Yeah, off to the side after. Whereas, they only take a couple of questions, so the questions should be ones that are, good for everybody. So they suggest a couple things, like if the speaker made a claim that something happened because of something or whatever, ask about
You claimed X, but didn't explain why. Could you briefly cover your methodology and data for that claim?
Yeah, or one of the other ones was pretty good too.
You said X is a best practice. Can you cover what practices you would cut to ensure their resources are available to do X?
Yeah, so basically if you're suggesting this new extra best practice, what best practice should we not be doing to make time to do the one you want us to do?
That's something to consider.
Good questions like that.
Yeah. You said that X dramatically increased your organization's security. Since we live in an era of assumed breach, can I assume that your organization is now committed to publishing details of any breach that happens despite X?
Yeah.
Some good stuff there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then we also have an article you linked to here from Ars Technica.
Yes. And it's actually, there's two links on one line, which is kind of unusual for the Roundup. But
I see it. With the paper here too?
Yeah. Okay. So Ars Technica has this big 2-page write-up on Symantec's talk at RSA.
Yeah.
And then I actually have Symantec's paper from the talk.
Oh, so we're getting more details on...
Yeah. It's about the beta of Stuxnet.
Yeah.
Basically, they were digging into version 0.5 and what it was about.
Yeah.
And the first thing they noticed is that it was from 2005, which makes it 2 years older than they had previously thought. Also, the way it attacked the centrifuges was very different. The original way it happened in the beta was that they would open and close the valves to the point where they would cause about 4 or 5 times as much uranium hexafluoride in the centrifuge as was supposed to be there, which would cause it to turn into a solid. And like you said, it'd be like a brick in a dryer.
Dong, 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 and just tear it up.
Wreck the centrifuges.
Yeah.
And so they have these little graphs with the different versions and what features they had.
And what vulnerabilities they took advantage of.
And how they spread to each other.
I love that.
Because one of the features of Stuxnet was a way for it to spread that didn't require the internet.
Right.
Because
USB sticks, network shares, local Windows Server RPC calls.
Yeah, and also the original version of Stuxnet only used one exploit, one very specific to the control software that the Siemens run. So to infect your computer, it assumed it only worked if you had the Siemens software for controlling the centrifuges on your PC. And it only infected the USB stick if you happen to save a Siemens control file to the USB stick.
So we check the stick to see if it has Siemens files on there.
Yeah, and only infect it if it did. Because they only want to infect the sticks that are going to go into the Siemens PLCs.
Right.
And, they go through all the evidence, and it's
And I think when it's a military strike like this, they have to take those extra precautions.
Well, with the later versions, they didn't, and that's why we saw
really?
Stuxnet get spread out, and it's probably the reason it got discovered.
Yeah, in fact...
If it hadn't spread to so many computers that weren't the Iranian facility, it might never have been made the news.
And like we talked about last 2 weeks ago, they'd swapped out some components, like they switched from the Flame platform.
Right, yes, that was the other big thing, was that in the beta, they found that in 0.5, Stuxnet looked a lot more like the Flame virus.
Yeah.
So what it looks like is Flame was like an offshoot of the beta of Stuxnet.
Yeah.
And then Stuxnet went kind of the other way and went towards this, the tinted platform, or tilted platform. And then we saw Dooku as well. But, it seems... Since Stuxnet was a collaborative effort between 2 or more countries,
right,
it seems maybe one of those countries kind of forked it off and went a different way with it.
And what's interesting is when the Stuxnet stuff broke, shortly after that, there was rumors to that effect that one party kind of went a little further than the other party.
Yeah, because we saw Flame, like Stuxnet was basically specifically targeted at the Iranian nuclear facilities,
right,
but Flame targeted computers and governments and so on anywhere in the Middle East.
Yeah, lots of computers, lots of systems.
Yeah,
not nearly as locked down. Lots of control servers.
Yeah,
really complicated stuff. Yeah, it's fascinating to see that stuff, Alan. Yeah. All right, now back to us. The Cyber Dialogue 2013 in Toronto.
Yes, this is actually the University of Toronto. If I wasn't busy, I might have gone to it.
Oh.
So they have here a paper about hacking back. So if you're one of these companies, like if you're Bit9 and this guy, the Chinese hackers or whatever, are trying to break in, how far can you go hacking back?
So, and I've said before, I'd be very tempted if I was on my system and I noticed somebody was logged in right then and there. It'd be really hard not to try to at least trace them back.
You're thinking about, redirect them to a honey trap,
right?
Where then you put the file they're looking for there, but it's not actually what they're looking for. It's a PDF with his own 0-day exploit virus or whatever.
Hit him with his own medicine.
Yeah, and so, they're making some of the moral equivalencies like, if someone breaks into your house and steals your stuff, it's still illegal for you to go break into their house.
Okay.
But so, and it's basically trying to differentiate between retaliation and active defense.
Right.
And things like that.
Right.
And it also talks a bit about the state-society relations, like how things work when you're differentiating between the state and individual people and how the state deals with people and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's an interesting read anyway.
All right. Now, something else from an RSA presentation.
Yes, these are the slides and comments from a presentation. I forget the guy's name now, but there's his blog.
Yes.
Vaguelythreatening.wordpress.com. So his topic was, now that the SEC has these rules that we've talked about in TechSNAP before, where companies have to disclose the risks they've been and stuff about cybersecurity.
Well,
the
they're asking them to, right?
Yeah. Well, the SEC also sends letters back. So when you file one of these filings, they send comments back sometimes saying, could you be more specific about this, include more of this, less than whatever. So he finds that because it's the SEC, these are all public. So by basically reading all the SEC's mail, as he calls it, he could, it was interesting to see what companies were saying and what the SEC wanted from them.
Yeah.
And so on. So it was very interesting. And so he's got slides about that. And
that's what his presentation was on?
And he said other blog posts there where he talks about some of the stuff. But yeah, I think in his slides he's talking about what Walmart said in one of their filings. And
That'd
so
be interesting. All right.
Because Walmart, it was a little business speaky, and the FCC's like, could you clarify this? Whether someone, you say you're under attack all the time, but did anyone ever get in?
Right.
That's the kind of stuff we want to put in these reports.
Yeah. Or everybody's getting port scanned all the time, but what do you really mean?
Yeah, and that's the other thing when you're talking about counting attacks and so on. It's like, we got attacked 100,000 times a day. It's like, yeah, well, port scan's not the same as someone's doing spear phishing and watering hole attack and breaching a laptop at Facebook.
And unfortunately, we're getting a lot of that kind of stuff these days. A lot of that kind of anything like that, you know.
Well, yeah, but you're talking about, like NASA was like, we got attacked 100 million times last year.
A tracking cookie gets counted as a malware infection.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of conferences, now maybe that was a blog post. Maybe we could switch gears to some videos from Slashdot.
Yes, Slashdot, they were at the ARSA conference. They did a bunch of interviews and recorded them for us. So the first one here is with a company called KeySource International. They've been around for like 30 plus years. They made like the original keyboards for the Apple Lisas or whatever. But now they make secure logon devices. So they seem pretty interesting.
And they have a little video you can watch
and
from
they're
the guy's
talking
booth.
about the security of physical devices and how to authenticate securely.
Yeah, very nice. All right, we got another one from Slashdot, and this one also includes a video.
Yes, this one is a company that made a self-encrypting USB hard drive that will work with any operating system.
Oh, so it's like doing it on the chip.
So it's doing it on the hard drive side rather than relying on your operating system to do it. This way, the files can be accessed in many different operating systems without having to have the software.
I like that. I like that.
Because a lot of the drives, if you buy them and they offer some encryption, the program's Windows only or something.
Yes.
Whereas this one would work between your Linux and your Mac or something.
Yeah. That's really cool. So there's a great video on that, and then we have another video.
Yes. This one's really interesting. It's from Pony Express, and basically they've built the Pwn Pad.
The Pwn
It's
Pad.
An Android Nexus 7 that runs Android 4.2.2 and Ubuntu 12.04.
Awesome.
And basically the idea is it allows you to be more stealthy while scanning networks. Basically, you can walk into a business and like be in their lobby or something, and you're playing with your Nexus 7 tablet, and it looks
like
normal.
they've added
like a super antenna so you can jack with. It can also do what's called long-range Wi-Fi packet injection. So it has a much stronger antenna, so it can send packets from farther away.
Very
you
cool.
can be outside of a building or like across the street at a Starbucks or something and be sending packets into their wireless network just to see what you can get out of it.
Ooh. I wonder if I can get that antenna for my Nexus 7 and then just load their image. I just want to have some fun. All right, well, our last video from the RSA conference, also a Slashdot video.
Yes, this one's a new concept. It's a company from, does it say which country they're from?
In North Sweden, in
Sweden, yes. So a Swedish company called Behaviosec.
There it is.
And they're basically developing a new authentication system that's based on behavioral biometrics.
So they monitor you?
I'm not exactly sure what it does. I didn't have time to watch all these videos.
Oh, yeah.
But it looks pretty interesting. As maybe two-factor authentication that's passive, right? It's not me having to type in an extra password. It's just telling things about me to guess whether it's me or not.
Hello, Alan. I've noticed you're not behaving like yourself today, so I've logged you out.
Something like that.
I mean, it seems like kind of like what they're saying is like your webcam's going all the time, watching your behaviors to see if you match the profile.
Right. And, a certain amount of fidgetiness or whatever. And that makes sense. But what if I have a cold and I'm acting grumpy?
Yeah. Or like me, I have allergies. So I'm sitting here, rubbing my nose all day, which I don't normally do unless I'm doing Coke, which I don't do.
What? You're rubbing your nose like that every show.
Okay, you got me there. I guess it is regular behavior.
So do I, though. And my nose only itches when it's live.
It's because all this talking vibrates the nose.
I think it is, yeah.
All right, Al, well, I think that brings us to the end of this week's episode,
That's the end of the show.
Boom, 2 episodes in a row, 100 and 101, and we want to thank everybody who tuned in and was able to watch us live. We are live over at jblive.tv, 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC.
And you can also join us over at jblive.info for the audio stream, which is great for you commuters or somebody who's stuck at the desk and they don't want to stream in video while you're working. I understand. I am a sysadmin. I have made that policy myself before. And we always appreciate anyone who downloads the show after the fact, subscribes to the RSS feeds to get the show automatically, rates, comments on iTunes, anything like that to help us continue to spread the show to the good people out there.
Yes.
All right, Alan. Well, thanks for the great show.
Yes, you too. Thanks for having me out here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for making it. And it's fun to be able to do 2 episodes. Maybe we'll do it again for 200 and 201.
Sure.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.